You gave too much. No one called it a problem. They just praised you for being kind, patient, responsible. They applauded your perseverance. They admired how you always stayed, even as you were slowly breaking inside. You didn't complain. You didn't walk away. You didn't explode like others might. You just quietly pulled back, little by little. Each smile became more forced, each nod more weary. Each time you said, "I'm fine," was another time you denied your real feelings. Until one day, you stood in front of the mirror. A faint light reflected a face both familiar and strange, and you looked deep into your own eyes, but couldn't recognize the man staring back. Not because you changed too fast, but because you'd been lost for too long. You didn't leave her. You left yourself day by day, silence by silence, effort after unreciprocated effort. And what hurt the most wasn't that you gave. It was that no one ever asked, "Are you okay?" You don't need pity. You just need to be seen for everything you've given. You don't demand. You don't make noise. You don't force anyone to understand you. You simply show up, on time, fully, without missing a beat. The first to pick up the phone when someone calls. The last to leave the party, because you don't want anyone to feel left out. The one who remembers birthdays, favorites, the little things others forget. You don't think of it as sacrifice. You just think, if I give enough, someone will see I'm worth keeping. But over time, you begin to notice something uncomfortable that no one says aloud. The more you try, the more they see it as normal. The more you show up, the more they assume. The more you care, the less they value it. You're not loved for who you are. You're needed for what you do. Your kindness no longer moves anyone. It becomes someone else's habit and your burden. One day, you bring flowers. They don't say thank you. One evening, you cook. They don't notice. You say kind words. They respond with silence. And what hurts isn't the coldness. It's the feeling of fading from the very story where you were once the center. You didn't change. You didn't stop caring. But their eyes changed. They don't see your tiredness. They don't ask if you're okay. Because the man who always gives is rarely the one people think to hold on to. You didn't break with a scream. You didn't smash things. Didn't walk away in anger. Didn't write a long message. Didn't leave behind any blame. You just, slowly, disappeared. On morning, you didn't text like usual. One evening, you didn't ask, "How was your day?" You stopped offering, stopped planning, stopped trying to make everything comfortable for others. No one noticed. No one asked, "Where are you?" Not a word. "You've been different lately." Not a single deep look to see if you were silent or hurting. You became a shadow in your own story. Present, but not seen. Helpful, but unnamed. Always there, but no one turned back to look. And then, in a quiet evening, sitting alone in a room once full of laughter, you finally understood what you'd been avoiding for so long. You were never loved for who you are. You were only needed when they lacked something, and when you could no longer provide it, or had nothing left to give, you became the extra piece in the very relationships where you once gave your all. Not because you changed, but because you stopped serving. And to them, that's when you stopped being useful. It wasn't anger. It wasn't impulse. It wasn't running away. It was clarity, a slow but firm realization. One Sunday morning you woke up early as always. The house was still quiet. Soft sunlight fell on the wooden floor. You picked up your phone, then put it down. There was no one left to text. No one who made you want to say, "Good morning." You didn't set appointments, didn't make plans, didn't invite anyone out. Not because you were angry, but because, for the first time, you no longer felt the need to try to connect. And the strangest thing was no one asked. No one noticed your silence. No one wondered why you disappeared from conversations that were once part of their lives. In that moment, you didn't feel hurt. You felt clear. A sharp clarity, quiet, not bitter. You just accepted not everyone who leaves does so because of you. And not every presence of yours is seen the way you once hoped. You started to understand. Feelings can't be held by persistence. Relationships can't be kept by one-sided effort. And true love will never make you beg for attention. So that morning, you stopped looking for anyone. You looked for a quiet place within yourself. Not to escape the world, but to return to the part of you that had been forgotten for too long. Peace. You didn't withdraw from the world. You just chose to step inward to the place you had long forgotten. No more noise from meaningless conversations. No more rushing into plans just to avoid feeling out of place. Just you, the familiar chair, a cup of coffee, and the silence that was never welcomed before. You walked with no destination, no headphones, no social media updates. Just you, your feet, and the wind moving through the trees. Everything inside you began to slow down, and strangely you saw more clearly, heard more clearly, felt more deeply. Dinner was no longer something rushed to fill the emptiness. It became a ritual, a simple pot of soup, a complete meal, a candle lit not for anyone else, just because you deserve it. The stillness that once frightened you has now become a refuge, no longer a punishment. It is where you lay your burdens down, where healing begins from the inside out. You remember who you were, before trying to be interesting, before forcing yourself to prove you were worthy of love, before wearing yourself down under others' expectations. You once thought being alone was a sign of failure, but now, in solitude, you find your wholeness again. You don't need anyone to tell you you're worthy. You just need yourself present, breathing, and living honestly. It's not loneliness, it's rebirth. And you've never seen life so clear and true. You're no longer in a rush, no longer diving into conversations to fill the silence, no longer trying to prove your worth by doing too much. Now, you walk slowly not because you're weak, but because you've chosen to move with intention. You don't do things that drain you. Don't maintain relationships out of politeness. Don't reply instantly just to ease someone else's mind. You don't ask for permission to rest. You rest when you need to. You leave when something feels heavy in your heart. You don't need to explain why. Don't need to prove your value by showing up. Because now, your presence has boundaries and purpose. If a conversation exhausts you, you step back. If someone doesn't listen, you stop speaking. If a relationship requires you to constantly brace yourself, you no longer hold on. You no longer try to be chosen. You don't chase anyone just to be seen. You choose yourself first and last. And in that choice, you find what you once lost: self-respect. No one taught you these new rules. You wrote them yourself, from old wounds, from the times you traded your peace just to keep someone around, from the days you smiled through discomfort just to make others feel okay. Now, you no longer try. You are simply clear, and in that clarity, you find a kind of peace no one can take away. You don't need to be understood. You no longer feel the need to explain your silence, your withdrawal, or your changes to anyone. You don't need their approval for the boundaries you set. And that's exactly what makes them fear you. They were used to the version of you who was always willing to explain, always softening your voice when others didn't understand. They were used to you being the one who fixed things, made peace, smoothed everything over. But now, you're no longer that man. Now, no one can use emotions to control you. No one can use silence to make you uneasy. No one can threaten to leave just to make you beg them to stay. Because a man who once lost himself trying to keep others will never allow himself to be lost again. You are not easily swayed, not easily moved. You're not pulled in by sweet words, nor shaken by late apologies. You don't need to be loved to feel worthy, because you've learned that worth is within you, not in someone else's gaze. And what they can't understand is how you can be so at peace without needing anything from them. But you don't need them to understand. You just need to keep living in the clarity you reclaimed. Because a man who once lived in chaos, once he finds peace, will guard it as the most sacred part of his life. Sometimes, someone asks you a gentle but heavy question. Don't you feel lonely? You don't rush to answer. You just smile, not forced, not avoiding, no need to justify. Then you speak, in a voice slow enough for even yourself to hear clearly. Loneliness is when you need someone to feel enough. Peace is when you don't need anyone and still feel whole. The home you live in doesn't echo with many people's laughter, but it doesn't lack the quiet you once longed for. You go to sleep alone, but you don't sleep with emptiness. You don't need someone to fill the space beside your pillow. You just need not to trade yourself to make someone stay. You used to fear silence, feared the steady spin of the fan in a room where no one spoke, feared meals with just one set of dishes, feared the soft light at day's end with no one to sit beneath it. But then you realized the things you once called lacking were what saved you from the cost of losing yourself. You don't avoid love. You just no longer see it as the only thing that gives you worth. Because you found that, right in your own honest presence. And from the moment you stopped running from being alone, you also stopped chasing rootless connections. You are not lonely. You have yourself. And for the first time in a long time, that is enough. You still believe in love. That belief hasn't disappeared. It has simply become conditional. The love you believe in now doesn't arrive in a rush. It doesn't need to be loud, doesn't need to make your heart race. It only needs to pass through the door of peace you've worked so hard to reclaim. You don't need someone to save you from loneliness. You're not looking for someone to heal old wounds, because you've done that yourself with patience, with time, with sleepless nights no one knew about. If love comes, it has to hold you wholly, not make you doubt yourself, not make you shrink or dim down to fit someone else's expectations. You no longer stay in a relationship just to avoid feeling left behind. You no longer fall apart to become the backdrop for someone else's journey. You're no longer willing to trade yourself for a few fleeting sweet words, because this time you know clearly. True love will never ask you to give up who you are. It won't require you to fade so the other can shine. It won't demand that you strain to prove your worth. And if that kind of love doesn't exist, you will still move forward. No bitterness, no disappointment, no collapse. Because after everything, you've returned to the person you lost long ago, yourself. And now, there's one thing you know more than ever. You can walk alone, but you will never again let yourself be lost. You're not cold. You're just clear. You're not withdrawing from the world. You're just refusing what brings chaos to your heart. You're not lonely. You're just not letting anyone in, unless they bring kindness, understanding, and respect. When you leave, you don't slam the door. Don't make noise. Don't leave behind harsh words. You just close it gently. And then, you don't look back. Because you know, what's behind once mattered, but no longer holds enough value for you to sacrifice your wholeness. You've learned the greatest lesson. You don't need to impress. You just need to never lose yourself again. And if one day, you meet someone like you, quiet, clear, yet full of light, know this, you are not alone. You are living proof of this. Peace is not a reward, it is a standard. And if there's ever been a chapter of your life where you saw yourself in this story, leave behind one final whisper, like the way you begin a new chapter. Peace is my power now,